welcome to the Conversations That Matter podcast. I'm your host, John Harris. This is the first installment in our Patreon exclusive series on Anglo-American conservative thinkers. I'm really excited about this. Our first work we're going to look at is Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France. We're going to proceed after this next month to the Anti-Federalist Papers. That's right, not the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. We're going to talk about John C. Calhoun and the disquisition on government, I think, after that. And then I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go. We're going to do probably a few more 19th century works and then get into the 20th century conservative tradition. Now, I want to tell you why I'm doing this, and then we'll get into Edmund Burke, and I'll introduce you to him. The reason we're doing this is because as Christians living in the United States, which is most of the people I'm assuming that are listening to this, we actually have a rich heritage when it comes to politics. We have Christians who have gone before us who have done a lot of profound thinking on some of the challenges that we're facing. And it seems to me like we are in a time where we have forgotten a lot about our past. We don't know about the people who came before us. In fact, I see a lot of people in the Christian world trying to, from scratch, with just their own notepad, perhaps in their Bible, figure out how to navigate political questions. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's a wrong thing to do. I'm not saying that doesn't serve a purpose. But it seems like it would be prudent if there were people who came before us who did a lot of thinking about some of the challenges that even we are navigating today. It would be prudent to go back and look at what they had to say, just like we would go back to the early church fathers or to the reformers, let's say, to navigate a theological issue. So that's really why I'm doing it. I think that we are also in a stage in the history of our country where a lot of people, even on the right, are buying into all kinds of ideologies. It's no longer even just classical liberal ideology of some variety. It's all kinds of different things. And I think 2020 opened Pandora's box because now people are looking for uh, reasons that happened. They know that the problems didn't start in 2020. They came before that. So they're trying to figure out where's the source. And there's all kinds of people on the internet that will try to sell you their cure and tell you this is the problem or that's the problem. This is the solution. That's the solution. And if you're not knowledgeable in history, if you haven't studied these things, it can be a little daunting. You don't know exactly where to turn. Some things make sense, but you're not sure. And there's just a whole lot of information out there. Well, obviously, I'm adding to that. But what I'm trying to do is tap back into something that is somewhat familiar to us. And maybe like someone recovering from amnesia, we will, including myself, be exposed to things that in our collective memory, maybe we forgot, but we know we forgot it in a way. I actually have thought this for a while that Americans, even ones who are more liberal, tend to also have these conservative instincts on some things. It's like two tracks that run parallel in their minds and their hearts that seem to contradict one another, but they don't ever try to figure out why the tension is there. For example, someone who really likes old Norman Rockwell paintings and loves the kind of idyllic American town. Of course, the forces of globalism they're not able to coexist with that town. And people might vote for the forces of globalism, but still romanticize that small town. Why is that? Because we do have, I think, something within us that values the small, that values the local, that loves federal arrangements. We might think of these things in terms of freedom, that we can do what we want, but and that can obviously take on a liberal connotation. It most often does today. But there's also a conservative way of looking at this, evaluating property rights and the ability to protect oneself and the things that one loves. And oftentimes, there are terms that will be uh, that meanings that will be pressed upon them that at one time would have been foreign to them, and then they're sold back to us as this is what America is about, right? It's about equality, it's about freedom, about liberty. Well, these things did mean something at one point on some level, but we've forgotten a lot about what they meant. And now ideologues want to take advantage of that. I think it's good to go back to the source. I think it's good to go back and figure out what is it that we have believed? What is it that made us the way we are, made us so successful, made people want to come here to this country? Is it because we just have these liberal values of choice and we can go anywhere we want and do anything we want and make any choice we want? And maybe someone will even pay for us to make choices because that's part of who we are. And participation in the market in this neutral public square that doesn't privilege any religion or anything else, any culture, that, is that what it is that has made us the way we are, or is it something else? I say it's something else. And I think you're going to see that as we go through this. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I just realized this as I was talking about the way that terms can change their meaning. The term conservatism needs to have an asterisk by it. I'm probably going to be using terms like conservative approach, conservative posture, conservative thinking. And the reason for that is because conservatism, if you want to call it that, it's not really an ism. It is, you could say, a reaction to isms. It's a reaction to Enlightenment rationalism, as people during the Enlightenment and afterward decided that they would reduce society to its scientific principles. And then, based on these scientific principles, remake society according to some utopian scheme. And there's many versions of this. Of course, we understand the egalitarian impulse, and that's what Edmund Burke was fighting against. That started in the French Revolution, at least on steroids. It started at that point. But there's of course other impulses out there that people try to then press down on the rest of society, force their vision. There's a sort of a rising bio or DNA style determinism right now, which is a reductionism. It's a modernist reductionism. And I think the conservative posture on these things has been to recognize that good things take centuries sometimes to develop, a long time. It's generations and a very short time to destroy. And when you come with an innovative idea that you want to press down on society, you do more damage than you would if you were to recognize the true and valuable things that exist, the balance of forces and arrangements that exist. And you would be a little bit more sensitive to disrupting those things, realizing you could do some real damage. And the 20th century is, of course, filled with stories of this kind of damage being done as dictators wanted to force utopian schemes and visions on their people. So conservatives recognize this. Conservatives recognize that there's a natural order that we must also subscribe to, that the definition of the good, the true, the beautiful, that this comes from God, essentially. And in the Anglo-Protestant tradition, which is what we're surveying, comes from Jesus Christ. That's our definition of what good is. And when you have a good that you are trying to conform your lives to, it means that there may also be some restrictions, some choices you shouldn't be able to make, nor should anyone. It's not unlimited freedom. It's not license, although it is ordered liberty. This tradition then mediates this divine order into specific tangible ways that apply to our context directly. That's what we're going to be talking about. And I think Edmund Burke is a really great way to start this off. Now, I don't agree with every single thing Edmund Burke has said or positions he's held, but I do agree with a lot of it. And I think that we would be foolish to not listen to his voice because he's got a lot of things to say, even things that today, in this modern era, really do apply. So I'm really excited to get into this. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you can listen to the whole thing. If you're watching this on YouTube, because there's going to be a shorter version on YouTube, you can go to patreon.com/John Harris Podcast, and you can find the full video. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to Edmund Burke and maybe some British conservatism, and then I'm going to stop. But if you are a Patreon, you will get the actual Great Books series episode. So you're going to get a full review, which is the lion's share of this video, of this, of what I'm going to be talking about here, on reflections on the revolution in France. That's what we're going to be talking about. So let's get started. Let me introduce you to one of my heroes here, Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke was born in 1729. He was born in Dublin, I believe. And he was an author. He was a Whig statesman. That was the party he was affiliated with in the House of Commons. And that was from 1766 to 1794. Some of his famous works are A Vindication of Natural Society, a philosophical inquiry into the origins of our ideas of the sublime and the beautiful. If you've read my book, Against the Waves, you'll know that I borrow heavily from Burke in my chapter on aesthetics. And of course, Reflections on the Revolution in France and an appeal from the new to the old Whigs. Now, there's a lot of other works that he did, and there's a lot of things attributed to him. By the way, one of the things that I looked it up just to see if it was authentic. One of the big quotes is, "The only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing." You've probably heard this. Apparently, Edmund Burke did not say that, so or at least it's disputed. But that is often attributed to him, and that might be one of the most famous things that you'll hear associated with Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke became the secretary to William Hamilton, who was the chief secretary for Ireland. And then he felt pushed into Parliament for financial reasons. He needed a job, basically. He was a man of letters. He had he had gotten training as a lawyer. His dad was a lawyer, but he just he liked to write. He was a brilliant writer. He became a brilliant speech maker in Parliament, but he needed to work. He actually had financial troubles his whole life. He became a member of the Rockingham Whigs due to their reverence for church and crown, for history and tradition, their preference for the organic society instead of the atomistic natural rights philosophy of 18th century revolutionaries. So the Rockingham Whigs were this group essentially in Parliament that were conservative. Now, they didn't use the term conservative at that point, but they were anti-revolutionary, which I would suggest is the essence of what a conservative is essentially. It is anti-revolutionary, or you could say counter-revolutionary in some ways. Whether anti or counter, they're against the innovative ideological revolution spurred on by modern thinking, and they want to preserve a sense of tradition, the past, and these things that reinforce the created order and the balanced good life that we share. Knowing it's not perfect, knowing man is evil, but knowing that there is an order we ought to conform ourselves to, and it goes better for us. Now, his legacy is far-reaching. Here's just a few things. Wordsworth called Burke by far the greatest man of his age. Lord Acton is most emphatic of all. He said that systems of scientific thought have been built up by famous scholars on fragments that fell from his table. And he keeps going and just waxing long about Edmund Burke. Burke is the only man, Adam Smith said, that I ever knew who thinks on economic subjects exactly as I do without any previous communications having passed between us. That's quite interesting. He is the father of conservative politics. He influenced Russell Kirk, Roger Scruton, and many other modern conservative thinkers. Now, I want to quote for you. This is from Russell Kirk's biography of Edmund Burke, and then from Jesse Norman's biography of Edmund Burke. Two passages here that highlight Burke's conservative posture. Russell Kirk contrasts two guys. And by the way, Russell Kirk, when he died, he had, I believe, started writing. He never finished it, but he had started writing this big, long book on contrasting different thinkers throughout time. And he looked at different ages that way. So you had essentially a conservative thinker and then this sort of like innovative revolutionary thinker, and they clashed. Well, for Russell Kirk, he believed Edmund Burke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau were those two people. So in the age of Rousseau, he says the era of abstraction, feeling, emancipation, expansion, equality, the people, absolute, the kiss bestowed upon the universe, and the deity impotent. That describes the age of Rousseau. That's the French Revolution. The system of Burke was prescription, experience, duty, old ties, social gradation, the reign of law, the love endangered by association, and the author of our being omnipotent. So in other words, God, order, tradition, these are the things associated with Burke, shared loves, stability. The things associated with Rousseau are unlimited choice and expanding that, egalitarian equality, nothing beyond the people as absolute. So there isn't an order that we have to conform ourselves to. We just create our own order. That's the difference. And I think that is true. Jesse Norman says this: Edmund Burke was a conservative, not a member of the Conservative Party, not a neocon or a theocon, not a Thatcherite or a Reaganite, but a conservative nonetheless. The founder, the first person who can properly lay claim to having forged conservatism as a distinctive body of political thought. As we've seen, liberalism, like its modern offshoot libertarianism or neoliberalism, emphasizes the primacy of the individual. Burke emphasizes the importance of the social order. Liberalism sees freedom as the absence of impediment to the will. Burke sees freedom as ordered liberty. Liberalism believes above all in the power of reason. Burke believes in tradition, habit, and prejudice. And that's, by the way, prejudice is used differently by Burke than the way we often think of it in negative connotations. Liberalism stresses universal principles. Burke stresses the fact and circumstance. Liberalism is unimpressed by the past. Burke quarries it. Liberalism admires radical change. Burke detests it. The liberal will cannot be made the subject of duties. Burke insists upon them. The evidence is clear. So let's talk about some of the issues that Burke, major issues at least, while he was in Parliament, navigated. One of the issues Burke navigated, and this will be particularly interesting for Americans, is American secession, or as we know it, the War for Independence, or some call it the Revolutionary War, even though it wasn't really revolutionary. And I have a lot of material on Burke. I'm not going to read all of it. Some of it I will summarize, but I will read this. Do not burden them by taxes. You were not used to do so from the beginning. This is a speech he gave in 1774 on American taxation in Parliament. Let this be your reason for not taxing. These are the arguments of states and kingdoms. Leave the rest to the schools, for there only may they be discussed with safety. But if intemperately, unwisely, fatally, you sophisticate and poison the very source of government by urging subtle deductions and consequences odious to those you govern, from the unlimited and illimitable nature of supreme sovereignty, you will teach them by these means to call that sovereignty itself in question. When you drive him hard, the boar will surely turn upon the hunters. If that sovereignty and their freedom cannot be reconciled, which will they take? They will cast your sovereignty in your face. Nobody will be argued into slavery. This is Burke essentially in 1774 predicting the War for Independence. And he is cautioning Parliament. In fact, he helped repeal the Stamp Act. He's cautioning them, don't do this. Do not force your way on these colonists. I didn't include this quote, but honor the ancient arrangement that we've had with them. Just honor that and stop trying to force them on a technicality that, you're technically the sovereigns because they're part of your empire. Don't do this. He said, in every arduous enterprise we consider what we are to lose as well as what we are to gain. And the more and the better stake of liberty every people possess, the less they will hazard in an attempt to make it more. These are the cords of man. Man acts from adequate motives relative to his interest and not on metaphysical speculations. Now, you're going to hear this kind of term a lot from Burke, metaphysical speculations. Aristotle, the great master of reasoning, cautions us, and with great weighing the propriety against this species of delusional geometric accuracy in the moral arguments, the most fallacious of all sophistry. This was a speech delivered to the House of Commons in 1775 called Conciliation with America. So he's kind of a hero to the United States in a way because he's in Parliament trying to essentially advocate for their cause. And he was partially successful, but ultimately, obviously, the United States left. So that was one of the issues that Burke got involved with. Another issue that he got involved with was slavery. Actually, I shouldn't say he got involved with this. I think I just added this. This is actually more of a footnote in Russell Kirk's book, but I found it interesting, and I thought on the American question, because it came up under that circumstance, that this was interesting. So Burke, like a lot of British politicians, was very against the slave trade, and he didn't like slavery. But one of the things that he says, and this is very similar to what you even find in the United States among gradual emancipationists. The same sentiment exists. He said that, this is Russell Kirk. He said that, well, I'll start from this. Although Burke was consistently opposed to the slave trade and slavery, he has been judiciously criticized by some writers for not approving the emancipation of slaves during the American Revolution. Here, Burke's argument was rather like his denunciation of the employment of savage Indian auxiliaries against the colonists. Social order would be destroyed and total war sanctioned without any provisions for the welfare of the freedmen. Besides, this tactic was a two-edged sword, and slaves might choose to aid the rebels rather than dubiously sincere emancipators. Now, I read that because it gives you a window into conservative thought, too, that some cures are worse than their diseases. You may have a goal that you want to achieve. You may have something that you think is good, but in achieving it, you cause 3 other problems, let's say. And that's one of the things that conservatives try to stress, is to cautiously approach even social reforms. It takes a lot of wisdom and prudence. And here you have Burke saying during that endeavor that wasn't a wise thing to do, to just wholesale free all the slaves at that time, even though he would have been against it and eventually wanting it to come to an end. He got involved also against the East India Company. The Ninth Report, which is a report that he authored, surveyed the recent history of the company, arguing that the Regulation Act of 1773, which sought to overhaul its management and improve its finances, was inadequate and being widely abused. It then traced the loss of revenue to Bengal, to private abuse and speculation, described the unavailing attempts of the directors to prevent misconduct, surveyed specific abuses in silk, opium, and other things, and pointed the finger squarely at figures in the company. So he was trying to say that the East India Company is a den of corruption and thieves, and he wanted to regulate it. And so that was another thing that he got involved with. And this was obviously pertaining to India at the time. He stood up for essentially, you could say, the rights of people in India. He also worked on behalf of Irish Catholics to repeal the penal laws in Ireland, which were somewhat strict. You couldn't own property over a certain amount. You couldn't, attend a Catholic church if you were a Catholic. People had to do it undercover and stuff. There was all these regulations, and he tried to get those repealed. And this might have something to do with the fact that he married, his wife was Catholic, I think. And I don't know when she converted. They had an Anglican ceremony, but she at least had been Catholic. His mother had been Catholic. His father was Anglican. So this was an interesting, he's from Ireland, so it's an interesting world that he came from. And of course, the French Revolution, which is what we're going to be looking at, that was one of his major topics that, in fact, his grave after he died is unmarked because he thought that Jacobins, or the supporters of the French Revolution, would possibly find it and dig it up and do things to it or something. So he died in an unmarked grave. This was the issue that he even died arguing about and thinking about, and had all kinds of back and forths with philosophers of the time, including people like Thomas Paine. But Thomas Paine was pretty critical. Later on, believe it or not, Karl Marx was critical of Edmund Burke. Of course, when Karl Marx doesn't like you, it's probably a good sign. Now, the interesting thing about Edmund Burke is he made some very accurate predictions, and I think this is one of the reasons that he is so well known. He called it. He just called it. When the French Revolution started, and he wrote this book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, I believe, it was 1790, which is pretty early in the process of the French Revolution. And he is able to predict Napoleon, the Reign of Terror, and the inflation crisis of 1795. All of those things he predicted. I'm not going to read you all the quotes. I'll read you the one about Napoleon. He said, "In the weakness of one kind of authority and in the fluctuation of all, the officers of an army will remain for some time mutinous and full of faction until some popular general who understands the art of conciliating the soldiery and who possesses the true spirit of command shall draw the eyes of all men upon himself. Armies will obey him on his personal account." Well, that's Napoleon. Napoleon didn't rise to power until 1799. This is 9 years before that, and he's calling it. And he did so with inflation. He did so with the Reign of Terror that Robespierre unleashed on the French people. So I think that should probably jolt us and make us want to listen to what Edmund Burke has to say, because how did he know that? How did he know at such an early point when people were still very positive about the revolution, supporting the revolution, thinking it was a good thing? Maybe we should do it in England. Maybe we should do it across Europe. And he's saying, guys, this is going to go bad. I know it's going to go bad. And that's what this book is about, is how he knew, why he argued that this would go bad. And it's a brilliant work. So with that, this is going to be the end of the video if you are not on Patreon. So patreon.com/John Harris Podcast. I will put the direct link in this particular video or in the info section. You can click on that and it will take you directly there. If you're not a patron, it's a small fee. If you really want this video, if you really want to listen to what I have to say on this, then, and you don't have the money or anything, that is just private message me on social media. I will send you the link because I want you to be able to watch it. But this is also how I sustain my family. So if you can afford it, it's only a couple bucks and I would really appreciate it. So let's go through this. We're going to start with the Revolutionary Society. Oh, and I should also mention this. If you're a patron, you are getting this slideshow. So if you want to go back and look at any quotes, you will have the opportunity to do that. It's going to also be attached to that link. All right, Revolutionary